Hey everybody, John Huber here, Maryland K-12. Catching up on a few things around the state of Maryland in terms of education. There's this situation in Towson where basically what happened was a young man noticed in his classes that there were, I think 2 of them, there were no American flags. Policy says supposed to be an American flag in every class. So he calls it out. He goes to the assistant principal. Assistant principal says he'll take care of it. Assistant principal never did. So then his next step, he goes to the Board of Education with a recorder running and hits the buzzer and says he wants to talk to a supervisor. He ends up getting suspended from what I'm reading here. It says I'm reading a Fox Baltimore report. It says he got suspended 7 days. That's a little excessive, I would think. But I will say this in the school's defense. This young man, no matter how terrific he may be, he has no business going to the Board of Education and knocking on their doors. He apparently went right over the principal, right over the area superintendent, right over everybody's head, and went right to the Board of Education knocking on the door. That's very disruptive. The school probably had an absolute right to suspend him. However, he apparently was suspended for 7 days. That was a little excessive. But the other thing is I think, and if you read it, it says that his lawyer is saying that he was suspended without due process. Therein lies the problem. How was this kid suspended? What was the process? Did they just call him on the phone and say, hey, you're suspended? You can't do that. Every kid is entitled to due process. Did they call him down, sit him in the office and say, explain to me what happened, allow the kid to bring witnesses, allow the kid to present evidence? That's what due process is. It appears, you never know. School's never going to tell you. They don't want to. But I also noticed this. In the video, Richard Muth, who is, I know Richard Muth. It's been a while since I've contacted him, but it was a good colleague of mine. He came out, and apparently he was standing there, and he was saying, you're suspended for 7 days, or he didn't say 7 days. He said, you're suspended, et cetera, et cetera. They're telling the police to remove him from the Board of Education. I don't think Richard Muth has the authority to suspend anybody, and I hope that that's not how it went down, because there's only one person who has the authority to suspend everybody, and it's not the assistant principal, it's the principal. The principal is the one who suspends kids. Who knows where all the intricacies lies? I just think it could have been handled a little better on both sides. This kid, what does he think's going to happen? What does he think? They're going to come out and say, "Oh, we're terribly sorry." No, he's creating this situation on his own. He went over a lot of people's heads to go up there knocking on the door of the Board of Education, and the Board of Education and the folks at the central office. They got to put a stop to it. They can't have every kid or every person who doesn't have something that they like come up there knocking on the door recording. They absolutely have a right to put a stop to that. The question is, how do they do it? We'll see. And I will tell you, this is not one of those situations where the school is trying to hide the American flags, right? And you see it, you hear the report on the reporter going, and he went to the school, and there were no flags in his room, and he wants to be a Marine, and they show him in his videos, yes sir, yes sir, yes sir. That's not what this is. Things happen. Those flags disappear. There's remember when you were in school, little teeny wooden ones that hang up on top of the chalkboard at the front, right? They disappear. They take them, the custodians take them down, they clean them, they make their way around, they never get back. And yes, it's I was in that situation. It's one of the checklists of things, as if you're in charge of the building, one of the administrators do. They go around, they make sure all the rooms, they have flags. You used to make sure they have pencil sharpeners, make sure you have enough desks, all that kind of stuff. And yes, a flag is in there. Yes, it's part of the policy. And the reporters, they're quoting BCPS policy says that. Yes. The school, the class didn't have flags. Yes, the assistant principal probably should have said, "Oh, we're so sorry. You're right, young man. We'll take care of it," and went and got some flags and put them in the classroom. But for whatever reason, he didn't do it. I'm sure it just kind of slipped through. And next thing you know, the kid's knocking on the door of the Board of Education. Bad all around. But the legal issue, I'm sure, resides in how the suspension was actually conducted. I believe, my opinion is, they say that I can tell you this, the schools, he was suspended for exercising his right to free speech. No, he wasn't. No, he wasn't. You can say whatever you want, but there are consequences to that free speech, and I'm sure that's exactly where BCPS is. I'll keep my eye on this, but I think it's a matter of process. I think it's a matter of how the suspension was conducted. I think they're perfectly within their rights to suspend a kid who just goes to the Board of Education and starts knocking on the door. They probably should have been a little more welcoming. Anyway, enough to talk about this. We'll keep our eye on it. We'll see how it goes. Thanks. Have a great day.